Alright, we are recording close enough. We've got a little bit of excess here on the side. I'll push this out to the side here. Alright, we are doing problem 5-3, start to finish, with anticipation of the most important thing being the dealing with repeating shapes. And we're going to go through and start with an architectural template purely because of the color thing and the importance of dealing with layers here. You go to a new template, you go to the architectural, realize that the only thing that's different about the architectural is that it has some layers that deal with color. So things will stay on color, and you'll use that later when you try to print this in color. One can learn to deal with that any number of different ways, but the important thing is to generally bring in with a name-based template. Check your units in any drawing that you're working in. So I'm going to type units here and see it was architectural. I'm going to take that back to decimal. And now I am going to turn all my layers on and thaw all my layers. I can do that by saying LA for layer or by using the layer toolbar. I'm looking to make sure everything is on. You don't see it on the screen, but I'm looking to make sure all the light bulbs are on. Now I'm going to draft a box bigger than the box I want to draft, and in this case this thing has a diameter of 4, so I'm going to draft a box that is equal to 10. We can start to skip some rules on some of these boxes. I'm going to click here and say at 10, 10. And then in the fact I would like to move that box, if I think about it being centered at 0, 0, I can do this now. Left click, spacebar, and I just want to do a move. I'm not going to do an add. I want to move it to 0, 0, 0. That puts it awfully close, and that's really not what I want. So I can even draw here, left point, line from the end point to the end point. Now I can grab everything. I can left click on that midpoint space and then move it to 0, 0, 0. I have my view box, undo here, erase out there. I really don't need that around. Shift the layer to hidden now, to center line if you want to start thinking about getting things on the right layers to start. Turning off the icon, UCS icon, that's one to write down. Off, and then I can now draw my first line by typing it. Line from 0, 0. At, I'm going to the outside of the teeth, so at 2 at an angle of 0, at an angle of 0, if you want to start getting used to the 3D. That gets you a line to the outside of the teeth. I left click, spacebar, rotate. I can do that, or at this point I can just do minus array, select my object, polar, shift right click endpoint, and the number of items is 8 and 360, and rotate the items. Then of course, knowing that these lines 1, 2, 3, 4 were set up for knowledge of the diagonals, we now have a line that could go in the object layer, which would be the diameter of 0.94. You learn to draw your circles by circle diameter or circle radius or circle and tangent radius. From the end point of there with the diameter of 0.94. In all reality, you could offset that now 0.25 to get your centers of each of your circles. You can now do a circle radius, center radius from the intersection of there, and the radius is 0.25. And at that point, you really don't need this anymore. Now you can offset through this line through a shift right click the quadrant point. You notice it jumped to the center. I don't want that. Offset through, shift right click to the quadrant point. It did that. You can now, for your brain, you perhaps can trim this. And now you can rotate it by left click. You can either rotate the circle or not. It makes a little sense in your brain to rotate both. Left click, then left click where you want to be. Spacebar, rotate. Take out your right hand 5 degrees. That now becomes the line that defines the kind of shifted interior hole. You can now either use mirror command or take it to the principal's office, I'll do it the other way. Mirror. Select my object. First point on mirror line, intersection, perhaps there, and a great snap to learn to use is near. You don't need to grab any particular point on that line. And then erase the source objects. No, you're there. You now have essentially those two lines when you've drafted this out in the first quadrant. Just to prove it to yourself, you could erase that circle if you want. And you can now do this, perhaps shift this line and this line to the correct layer, object, and then say fillet radius 0.25, and you get that done. Your next interior circle has a diameter of 3.5. You can draw your center diameter, shift right click, intersection of here, your diameter is 3.5. You've got that. You learn to do some things like breaks in a positive direction, so you can break this all the way around the pike and then do fillet radius 0.13. Spacebar to do it again. You have essentially what is a polyline there, so you can p-edit it. Yes, join, grab all those things around, and later on you're going to see you might make that a region to do a subtract, but now you've got a polyline. It's a repeating shape, repeating shape, repeating shape. You think block, you make block. How do you make a block? Best case scenario is to put it on layer 0 to start. Say minus B. Give it a name. Center, big hole. Insertion base point is not always on the piece. In this case, the obvious insertion base point is the center because you're going to rotate it about the center. You grabbed your object. It went away. To bring that object back, you go to your current layer object. You say I for insert. You go to here and make sure that is exploded. That is clicked off. You go down to big hole. You bring it back at the intersection. And this is the point that you can now go, you're going to the principal's office. Left click, left click, left click, or better yet, minus array. Select my object. Polar. The intersection here. Number of items 4, 360, and rotate the objects yes. Why do you do that? So then later on, right, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this circle, which is no longer necessary, and do a new circle, center radius. So we're going to go draw a circle, center diameter, shift right click, the intersection here. It has a diameter of 0.38. Alright, you now have some set of repeating shapes that if you could later on do something else, you'd be kind of in good shape. So we're going to go on and make your next set of repeating shapes. Your next set of repeating shapes will be at 10 degrees. Every tooth, you count your teeth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 36 around the pike. And so you have 10 degrees per, and so you left click, spacebar, spacebar, C, 10 degrees. Now you have, in effect, you have an exterior at 4 and an interior at 4.25. You already have that, so you can actually do center radius this way from the intersection of there and pull it out to that first line you did. And then just to be curious and check, you list it. You get it, yes, that is a radius of 2, which is actually to our interior. I did that wrong. And so now we want to do offset 0.125 or draw a diameter of 4.25. Recognize that sometimes you have to use your visuals as well. If your diameters are off by 0.25, your radiuses are off by 0.125. Once again, center, diameter, shift right click, intersection here. That intersection and a diameter of 4.25. Now it's starting to get scary. You can extend that and that. And now you can draw your tooth. And the tooth is very peculiar out here. Your tooth is going to be just this much. Change your object. You can do a trim at this point. You can trim that line out. And you can do a line from the end point here to the intersection there. You really don't need this out there anymore. And in the reality, you don't even need this, though you might want to bring it back later. That is your repeating shape. What do? Put those things on layer 0. In all reality, you probably would, instead of erasing, you might have done trim. Click on this and this, trim that back. Take all these things, left click, left click, left click, change them all to layer 0. Maybe do a p-edit. Select your polyline. Yes. Join. Click, click, click. And now a new block. -B. Small tooth. Insertion base point is not always on the piece. Select your objects. They're gone. Your layer is now object I for insert. Grab your, not your big hole, but your small tooth. Hit OK. Shift right click, intersection there. You have one, now you can left click. Left click, and you could do the rotate copy, but you want to do a bunch, so you do the -array. You grab that piece, that one thing that you want, shift right click, polar, P for polar. Center point is the intersection there. Number of items, 36. Items to fill, 360. And then rotate the items, yes. If you don't like that seam line in there, here's how you could do it. You could now think about layers. You could make a new layer by saying -layer, new, hide, or BLO key, block, underscore, HIDE, block hide. And now you can do b-edit, block edit. You can go back to your small tooth, OK. You could now take this if you want and explode it, and you can change that to a different layer. So you go ahead, right click, properties, change that layer to, you guessed it, not 0 at this point in time, but block hide. You won't see any real difference to it except for when you hit close block editor, save the changes to small tooth, you see that it acts a little different. So now when you do this layer, you can go in and change the visibility, if I can move this, which I can't, so you just have to go to that layer. I can't move that from off the screen, it would appear. There it is. You go to that block hide and you freeze that layer. And you have what is something that can be changed and maintained. Thanks for listening. That's fast. We'll break it down in steps, but every time you see a repeating shape, think block.